When everyone else saw courage, he saw fear. But it was that fear, that piercing chill in his soul, that made him invincible. Because for Muhammad Ali, fear was not an enemy. It was the fuel of success. The silence before the fight was deafening. The gym lights flickered over the ring, and the crowd roared as if the ground were shaking. Muhammad Ali, the man who proclaimed himself the greatest of all time, closed his eyes for a moment. On the outside, he looked like a wall of confidence. Inside, his heart beat like a war drum. He felt the fear, the same fear many try to hide, deny, pretend doesn't exist. But Ali did the opposite. He embraced it. He took a deep breath and let the fear wake him, keep him alive, remind him that every second was decisive. Since he was a boy, Ali understood something few have the courage to accept. Fear isn't an obstacle, it's a signal. It's a warning that you're about to do something important. When he stepped into the ring, he knew he could lose. He could fall. He could fail in front of the world. But it was precisely this possibility that drove him to train to exhaustion, sweat until the last drop, repeat the same move thousands of times until he transformed fear into rhythm, strength, and precision. Ali used to say, "He who is not afraid cannot be brave." And this simple yet profound phrase sums up the soul of a man who went far beyond boxing. Because he didn't just fight opponents, he fought his own limits. Every victory was an internal battle won. Every defeat a lesson etched in blood and sweat. Ali's secret wasn't just his quick fists or his graceful dancing on the ring. It was in his mind. He learned that fear, when tamed, becomes the most powerful energy there is. The same energy that drives heroes, dreamers, and winners. The difference is that, while the world saw fear as a break, Ali saw it as fuel. And that's what we're going to talk about. How one man transformed the most human emotion into his most lethal weapon, and how that vision forever changed the meaning of courage. Louisville, Kentucky, 1954. A skinny 12-year-old boy rides his red bicycle through the dusty neighborhood streets when suddenly it disappears. Stolen. Cassius Clay, furious and frustrated, runs to the local police station and yells at the officer, "I'm going to get whoever did this." The man behind the desk, Joe Martin, simply smiles and calmly replies, "Before that, boy, you need to learn to fight." These words would be the trigger for a journey that would change the world. On that sultry afternoon, Cassius didn't know it, but he was taking the first step toward becoming Muhammad Ali. The first practice was disastrous. The smell of sweat and leather filled the small gym, and the sound of punches hitting the sandbags echoed like thunder. Cassius could barely keep his guard up. His heart raced, his stomach churned. He felt fear, real, raw fear that burned in his chest and made his hands tremble. When Joe corrected him, he nodded silently, swallowing hard, trying to hide the panic that gripped him. But something inside him whispered, "Keep going." Fear at that stage wasn't yet fuel, it was a weight. But a weight that pushed him forward, as if the shame of giving up was more frightening than the fear of getting hit. Over the next few weeks, Cassius trained as if every blow could bring his bicycle back. He arrived before everyone else and left last. His fists ached, his arms burned, and the glove strings marked his skin like war wounds. But he didn't stop. The fear of failure began to mix with the will to win. "I wanted to prove I was someone," he would say years later. "I wanted to show that my fear wasn't my boss." When the day of his first amateur fight arrived, the gym was packed. The smell of peanuts and cigarettes hung in the air. Cassius was shaking so badly that his coach had to squeeze his shoulders and say, "Boy, everyone's afraid. The difference is what you do with it." When the bell rang, time seemed to slow down. Each punch was a dialogue between fear and courage. In the third round, he landed a clean blow and watched his opponent fall. Silence. Then applause. Victory. But Cassius didn't smile. He just took a deep breath, his heart still racing, and thought, so this is how fear transforms. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling and murmured, "I was afraid, and I still overcame it." It was then that he understood something that would guide his entire life. Fear is not the opposite of courage. It is its birth. He awoke the next day a different man. No longer a boy running from fear, but someone willing to face it head-on. The lost bicycle was never found, but in its place, Cassius discovered something far more precious, the spark that would one day set the world on fire. And so it was with frail fists, trembling body, and burning heart that the man was born who would learn to fight not just with his muscles, but with his soul. Because from that day on, Ali never fought others. He fought the fear within himself. And with each victory, he tamed it a little more. The name Cassius Clay was the one everyone knew. But to him, it felt like a prison. A name inherited from a past that no longer represented him. It was during the 1960s when the world was in turmoil, protests, wars, racism, and revolution, that the young champion made a decision that would shake America. After defeating Sonny Liston to win the world heavyweight title, he announced, "I am no longer Cassius Clay. That is the name of a slave. My name is Muhammad Ali." The phrase struck like a thunderbolt. Within seconds, the American hero became an enemy. The press called him arrogant, a traitor, an extremist. But Ali didn't care. For the first time, he felt he was being true to himself. Behind the scenes, however, he trembled, not from fear of what people would think, but from the weight of his own courage. He knew what he was doing. He knew that defying the system would cost him dearly. But he also knew that living in fear of being who he was would be a far greater defeat. "If I don't believe in myself, who will?" he would say, staring into the mirror before each interview. The fear was still there, like an old traveling companion. But now he had learned to use it as a shield, an invisible weapon. Every time he opened his mouth in front of the cameras, Ali turned fear into a spectacle. "I'm beautiful. I'm fast. I'm the greatest of all time," he shouted, provoking laughter, hatred, and admiration. Many thought it was pure arrogance. Few realized that behind that mask of confidence lay a mind dancing with fear. He didn't try to hide what he felt. He transformed it into a performance. Fear made him study his opponents, predict their moves, plan every word and every blow as if it were all part of script. It was psychological warfare, and Ali was the general. It was with this energy that he faced Sonny Liston, a man feared even by his own bodyguards. Before the fight, no one was betting on Ali. "He'll die in the ring," the journalist said. But the young champion had already decided. He would use fear to his advantage. That night, when the lights went out and the bell rang, Ali moved as if fear were driving him. He danced, dodged, taunted, smiled. Every punch Liston threw was an attempt to break him. But fear kept him awake, light, and electric. In the sixth round, when Liston didn't return to the ring, Ali raised his arms and shouted, "I'm the greatest!" The crowd erupted, and for the first time, the world believed. In the following days, the newspapers attacked him. They called him insolent, ungrateful, subversive. But Ali responded calmly, "I don't need the world to understand me. I just need the world to listen to me." And he was heard. His conversion to Islam, his refusal to conform to the imposed norm, his firm voice in the face of oppression. All of this transformed him into something greater than an athlete. He became a symbol. Behind the scenes, however, there were still nights when fear visited him. Alone in his room, he would stare at the ceiling and wonder if he had done the right thing. But the silence always brought the same answer: yes. Because fear for Ali was proof that he was still alive, that he was still fighting for what he believed in. And so, the man the world called arrogant began to reveal his true power, to transform vulnerability into courage, doubt into faith, fear into strength. It was in this fire that Muhammad Ali was born. And from then on, fear would never again be an obstacle. It would be the fuel that kept him burning until the final round. If even the greatest of all time felt fear before conquering the world, imagine what we can achieve if we stop running from ours. If this story inspires you, like and comment. What has fear made you face? The whole world knew Muhammad Ali as the invincible man, the boxer who danced about the ring as if defying gravity. But in 1967, he fought a fight that involved neither gloves nor gong, a silent, devastating internal war. The United States government drafted him to fight in Vietnam, but Ali refused. "No Vietnamese called me an enemy," he said before the cameras, his voice firm and his gaze defiant. That sentence echoed like a punch in the face of America. In a country divided by war, he chose to side with conscience and paid the price. In just a few months, Ali lost his world title, his license to fight, and his freedom. He was condemned, humiliated, and boycotted by the media that had once called him a hero. His sponsors abandoned him. His friends drifted away. But what hurt him most wasn't the loss of the belt. It was the silence. The ring was his temple, and now it was empty. For the first time since childhood, Ali found himself trapped within himself, fighting the fear that had always haunted him. Only this time, the enemy was faceless, wore no gloves. It was the fear of oblivion, the fear of being nobody anymore. He woke every morning and looked at his hands, those same hands that had once felled giants, and asked himself, what if I can never fight again? The answer came with anguish, but also with purpose. Fear keeps me alive, he would say. If I lose my fear, I lose the will to fight. So he began training, even without a ring, even without an audience. He ran through the streets of Louisville, under the suspicious gaze of his neighbors. He ran in silence, sweating anger, sadness, and faith. Each step was a declaration of resistance. The press called him a coward, a traitor, and an unpatriot. But Ali knew that courage wasn't about obedience, but about remaining true to what you believe. And that's what kept him going. He began giving lectures, visiting universities, and speaking to young people who also felt lost between fear and duty. The real enemy isn't on the other side of the world, he said. It's within us. It's the fear of saying no. But as strong as he seemed, there were nights when he crumbled. Lying on a simple bed in the small apartment where he lived on a shoestring, Ali stared at the dark ceiling and remembered the roar of the crowds, the sound of flashbulbs, the smell of the ring. It all seemed like a distant dream. And it was in this silence that he discovered something new. Fear can also be a teacher. It taught me patience, he wrote in a notebook he kept like a diary. It taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to understand who you are. 3 years passed. 3 long years without fighting, without hearing the bell, without tasting victory. His body aged, his reflexes diminished, but his mind, it was sharper than ever. He meditated, trained, studied, and transformed fear into discipline. When the court finally overturned his conviction, the world expected to see a defeated man. But what returned to the ring was not the same Ali. He was a warrior shaped by the fire of doubt and the courage to be true to himself. Fear had consumed him, yes, but it had also rebuilt him. When asked if he regretted refusing the army, he replied without hesitation, "I would be afraid to look in the mirror if I had lied to myself." That word didn't make him a champion. It made him a legend, because for the first time, the world understood that Ali's courage wasn't in his punches. It was in his soul. He proved that fear isn't the enemy of the strong man, but the ultimate test of the true man. And in the end, even without gloves, Muhammad Ali won the greatest fight of his life. The fight against the fear of losing everything for what he believed in. The whole world thought Muhammad Ali was finished. 3 years away from the ring, his youth fading, his reflexes slower, his body scarred by time. Critics said he would never be the same again. But for Ali, the fear of no longer being the greatest was the fire that kept him burning. They think I'm old. They think I've weakened. Little do they know that the fear of falling is what keeps me getting up every day. And so, with a tired body and a burning spirit, he decided to return. His return began with smaller battles, but each one was a personal war. The cameras followed him, the journalists jeered. The myth is over, they said, but each blow he landed was a silent response. The audience, previously divided, began to feel something different, respect. There, he was no longer just a boxer. He was a symbol of resilience, a man who refused to give up, even when his own body begged for a truce. But the true test was yet to come. In 1974, in Zaire, fate placed before him the most feared opponent of his generation, George Foreman, a young, brutal monster, possessing a strength capable of knocking out anyone in seconds. The experts predicted Ali would be crushed, that this fight would be the end. But in the locker room, Before entering the ring, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, fear. You're back, just in time." He knew that without fear, there would be no focus, no strategy, no fire. The African heat was suffocating. Thousands of voices shouted, "Ali, Bome," which in Lingala meant Ali, kill him. The tension was palpable. When the bell rang, Foreman charged like a bull. Every blow he threw was a thunderclap. But Ali didn't fight back. Leaning against the ropes, he smiled. The audience didn't understand. He was taking a beating, and yet he smiled. Fear made him see what no one else could see. He knew Foreman was expending too much energy, knew that giant couldn't hold his own weight for long. This was his tactic, the legendary rope-a-dope, the rope trick. He absorbed the punishment, feigned weakness, and let his opponent exhaust himself. For 7 rounds, Ali took a beating. But every punch he took was a calculation. Every second he resisted was a step closer to victory. Fear made him think quickly, breathe deeply, endure the pain. "You're not going to knock me down, George," he whispered in his rival's ear between clinch moves. "You're tiring, and I'm just getting started." By the 8th round, the giant was already breathing heavily. Ali saw the opening. A perfect, precise, relentless sequence. A left hook, a straight right, and the Colossus collapsed. Foreman went down. Silence for a second. Then, all hell broke loose. Ali raised his arms, exhausted and triumphant, as if holding up the sky itself. The impossible had happened. The man everyone called finished had just defeated brute force with intelligence, patience, and controlled fear. When asked what he felt at that moment, he replied, "I felt fear, fear of losing, fear of not being the same. But it was that fear that kept me alive. It reminded me that I still had something to prove." On that hot night in the heart of Africa, Ali didn't just defeat a man, he defeated time, doubt, and oblivion. He showed that fear, when understood, is a divine force. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. After the fight, as he staggered to the locker room, sweating and staggering, someone heard him say quietly, "I'm back." And fear came back with me. The Rumble in the Jungle went down in history as one of the greatest fights of all time. But for Ali, it was more than that. It was a prayer in combat form, a conversation between a man and his own fear. And there, under the African lights, Muhammad Ali proved that the true champion isn't the one who never feels fear. It's the one who turns it into the strength that keeps him fighting. The years passed like slow, invisible blows, and the legend who once roared in the center of the ring now faced an unseen enemy, time. Muhammad Ali's body, once agile and unbeatable, began to betray the spirit that still pulsed like fire. The diagnosis came as a low blow, Parkinson's, the disease that would render him immobile, that would rob him of his voice, that would erase the reflexes of the fastest hands in the world. When the doctor told him, Ali simply smiled with that same glow he always had before a fight and said calmly, "I've faced worse than this." Fear, his old companion, sat beside him again, but this time not to propel him into the ring. Now, it was there to remind him of something deeper, that greatness lies not just in winning, but in continuing to fight even when there's no chance of victory. The days became silent, the mornings slow. Every simple movement, tying his shoes, holding a glass, signing an autograph, became a battle. And yet, he didn't stop. "As long as I breathe, I'll be fighting," he said. Friends and fans wept when they saw him like this, but Ali never asked for mercy. He knew that true courage lies not in lifting the belt, but in facing the mirror when the reflection no longer looks the same. "Before I fought with my fists," he once said. "Now I fight with my silence." And that silence spoke louder than 1,000 interviews. Even without a voice, he continued to inspire millions. In his public appearances, the entire world gave him a standing ovation. Every look, every trembling smile was proof that the human spirit can be stronger than any disease. At home, surrounded by his family, Ali spent hours in reflection. The fear of death visited him sometimes, like an ancient shadow, but he welcomed it like a longtime friend. "Fear has been with me since the beginning," he murmured. It taught me humility. It taught me respect for life. In moments of deep silence, he remembered his childhood, the stolen bicycle, the training sessions at Joe Martin's gym, his first title, the crowds chanting his name. Everything seemed distant, yet alive within him. The fear of losing control, of being forgotten, of leaving no legacy. All of this became, once again, fuel. He wanted to leave something greater than victories. He wanted to leave a message. Even with his frail body, Ali became an ambassador of peace, faith, and courage. He traveled the world, speaking, or trying to speak, about hope. The trembling in his hands didn't dim his light. When he lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, the entire world fell silent. The flame trembled in his hands, as if fear itself were trying to extinguish the flame. But Ali held it steady. That moment was more powerful than any knockout blow. It was a living symbol that fear can burn, but never extinguish the spirit of those who have learned to transform it into strength. In his later years, his gaze spoke volumes. He no longer needed words. There was peace in his slow gestures, wisdom in the calm with which he observed the world. Fear no longer dominated him. It was merely an ancient, tamed visitor. Fear made me who I am, he told a friend shortly before he left. Without it, I would never have found faith. And when silence finally came, it wasn't a defeat. It was just the final round of a lifelong fight. Because Muhammad Ali didn't die a champion, he died a master. A man who taught the world that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the art of dancing with it until the end. In the end, the ring was empty, the crowd fell silent, but the lesson echoed in the air. Fear can bring down a body, but never a spirit. And perhaps that's why, to this day, even in the eternal silence, Muhammad Ali's voice still resonates. I am the greatest. Because I was afraid, and yet I never stopped fighting.